Good evening and welcome to the monthly meeting of Jewish Voice for Peace, Central Ohio, a conversation with Dr. Alice Rothchild. I am Farrell Brody, a member of this chapter, and it will be my pleasure in a moment to introduce our speaker tonight. I want to thank JVP members of this chapter, Connie Hammond, Amy Schuster, and Michael Liebert, for arranging this program. We will be recording this, so we ask all listeners to mute themselves during Dr. Rothschild's talk. If you'd like, please put your name, affiliation, and location in the chat box. The chat box is available for questions, and we are also streaming on Facebook. Amy Schuster will be monitoring the chat box as we go along. If you experience any video or audio problems, you may want to stop the video at the bottom left of your screen. Dr. Alice Rothchild is a retired obstetrician, gynecologist, who served in the health reform and women's movements for many years. She is also an author, filmmaker, and member of JVP. Her books include Broken Promises, Broken Dreams, Stories of Jewish Trauma and Resilience, 2010, On the Brink, Israel and Palestine, on the End of the 2014 Gaza Intrusion, written in 2014, and Conditional Critical, Life and Death in Israel-Palestine, 2016. The last of these was our chapter's reading this past year. Also, her films include the documentary Voices Across the Divide, the co-winner of the 2013 Audience Award at the Boston Palestine Film Festival. She is now active on the national level as a member of the JVP Health Advisory Council, on the board of the Gaza Mental Health Foundation, as well as Just World Educational, and she was on the coordinating committee of Jewish Voice for Peace in Boston. She is now working with We Are Not Numbers, and that will be her focus in this conversation. Believe me, I could go on and on about all that Dr. Rothchild has done, but I'll just say, Dr. Rothchild, thank you very much for being with us on this conversation. And now the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to take a minute to share my screen. So thank you everybody for joining us for this conversation about We Are Not Numbers on this very crazy and momentous day. I'm going to share with you some background about Gaza, bring some voices from We Are Not Numbers to you, and then we can have a conversation. So just so we're all on the same page, I always think it's important to remember the this is moving ahead, the background that the people who are living in Gaza live with. And just the very, very briefest of histories, we need to remember that in the 1948 war, there were hundreds of thousands of refugees created, and 70% of the Gazan population are currently refugees. So this is a region of the world with multi-generational trauma. And if you look at the Gaza Strip, let me just get rid of this. Okay, so this is a map just to get everybody oriented. This is Jordan, this is Israel, the West Bank, And the Gaza Strip is about 6 by 26 miles in size between Egypt and Israel. And I've been to Gaza 3 times, and we enter through the Erez checkpoint here with Israel, and there's Gaza City in the north and Khan Yunis in the south, Rafah and Egypt. And if you're in Massachusetts, if you put Gaza on Massachusetts, it's a tiny little band of land. So it's a very small area. Now, if we're going to just have the brief history, in 49, the Egyptians took control until 67, when the Israeli occupation began with the 67 war. And that is the beginning of military rule. And then Jewish settlers were moved in. They then were, quote, disengaged in 2005. And then that was the beginning of a very serious blockade of Gaza. The following year, there was a democratic election, which Jimmy Carter certified as democratic, and Hamas won the majority in the Legislative Council. And then the year after that, there was a civil war, a Fatah coup, partly funded by the US. And that's when Hamas took control. And the international community, led by Israel and the US, responded with a severe blockade siege, which continues to this day. Now, throughout all this time, there have been recurrent Israeli Defense Force incursions. There have been recurrent episodes of rocket fire from Gaza and a growing humanitarian catastrophe. There have been 3 massive Israeli assaults in 2008, 2012, and 2014, as well as all the ongoing lower level incursions. So if you look at the ages of the writers, they're between 17 and 29. You can imagine how old they were for each of these wars, and they have all lived through each of these wars. There's also been the Great March of Return from March 2018 to December 2019. And then this year, the next big issue was the COVID pandemic. Now, many of you are aware that the UN has said several years ago that Gaza would not be habitable by 2020. We're now in 2021, and there are still over 2 million people living in a place that is no longer habitable. And when we say there's a desperate humanitarian catastrophe, beyond the siege, there are issues around water, pollution and salination, because the aquifers are below the sea level. So 97% of the water is not drinkable. Healthcare, the healthcare system was on life support before the pandemic, and it's in a catastrophic state now. The majority of people are food insecure or rely on food from outside sources. There are fuel shortages because the fuel comes in from Israel. You will hear the writers talk a lot about electricity. Depending on the year, electricity is 4 hours to 8 hours a day in a 24-hour period. And it's not a predictable time, so you never know. So I have friends who put their TV on at night, and when the electricity comes on, the TV goes on, they all wake up and then they study and do the laundry and do what they're going to do. So they're living in this crazy kind of modern life, but not reliable electricity. The Israelis bombed the sewage treatment plants as well as the water treatment plants. So there's a huge sewage crisis. There's a housing crisis. There's a tremendous amount of environmental contamination from all the military detritus. And then you add that on with climate crisis. Gaza is at sea level. And then COVID-19. So this is what a humanitarian catastrophe looks like. So when you see what the writers are talking about, when you read their stuff, think of how brave and how solid and how amazing they are to be doing this in this context. The other big issue is the ideologic and geographic split between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is run by Fatah, and the PA functions basically as Israel's ally, isolating and punishing Hamas. And what they do, an example of what they do, is withhold the transfer of revenues, tax revenues. So there's been a marked reduction in public health sector salaries. So this is a man I met when I was there who's in the Ministry of Health, and he gets about 40% of his salary. And you hear that over and over again. Now, I keep mentioning COVID because I can't talk about COVID enough. And I keep with Jewish Voice for Peace a weekly COVID timeline, because COVID affects everyone in Gaza. There have been a number of writers who've gotten sick. Their families have gotten sick. So it's a real threat to everyone. And if you just look at this graph, this is a weekly graph and the number of cases. So it started in March, and you can see that there were actually incredible public health maneuvers that were done isolating anyone who came in. And it was basically contained. And it was also contained because Gaza is so isolated. Community spread started in August, And you can just see that it's just taken off. And this line just keeps going up. So COVID has a real impact on these young people's lives. And we should also remember that this is a tremendous undercount of the number of cases because there's not adequate testing. Now, I just want to focus briefly on the last massive war, the 2014 war, because We Are Not Numbers came out of that war. During that war, 74 Israelis were killed, 500 were injured, over 2,000 Gazans were killed, 1,500 civilians, 12,000 were injured, more than 100,000 homeless, almost 500,000 without water. Tens of schools, hundreds of schools were damaged, 18,000 houses destroyed, even more damaged. Massive numbers of children were left with permanent disabilities, were orphaned, and it was estimated that 370,000 children were left in direct psychological need of support for the consequences of trauma and war. So some of these writers are those children. And during that time, 20,000 tons of explosives were dropped on a strip of land 6 by 26 miles in 7 weeks. And there were about 10 tons shot into Israel. And the UN estimated that $1.4 billion in direct and indirect damages were occurred, and a huge amount, $1.7 billion in economic losses, which partly explains why things are so catastrophic now. And again, this is Gaza, Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, Jabalia, Gaza City, all the way down to Rafah. And as I said, the impact of the bombing, one of the impacts was this massive destruction of civilian infrastructure. I mentioned electricity and water treatment and sewer treatment, but also homes, clinics, hospitals, as well as schools. This is a picture of the Ministry of Finance, and most of these pictures I took or members of my delegation took. And there was a huge amount of homelessness. This is Beit Lahia, where 30% of the 100,000 homeless people were living in bombed out shelters. And I talked to people living in these shelters. So this is the kind of things that these youth have experienced. When I say that the sewage treatment plants were damaged, this is Wadi Gaza. It's a flow of raw sewage that goes directly into the Mediterranean. And in 2019, it was estimated that 120 million liters of sewage are discharged into the Mediterranean every day. And so 64% of the beaches are contaminated, and it's a major fishing area, and people are fishing in these contaminated waters. Now, this is all put together results in about a 50% unemployment rate for everyone. It's much higher for youth, and it's in those kind of numbers for college educated youth, which are the youth that we're working with. And it's important to remember that Gaza is a very young population of about 2.2 million people, 63% are under 25. And this is a picture we took in Shajaria in 2015. And these kids are highly traumatized. This was a study, just to give you an example, by a Norwegian Refugee Council that said that 2/3 of the children living along the perimeter suffered psychological stress. Almost half of them had seen a bomb. A third knew someone who was killed. 1 in 14 lost their homes, and 81% were struggling academically. And when you see these kind of numbers, again, you will see why it's so impressive, the kind of work that these young people do. The other thing about the Israeli siege, besides not allowing people or goods to go in or out, is that Israel does other things, like they fumigate farmlands with herbicides, including Roundup, along the perimeter fence. They've completely decimated the fishing industry by severely limiting fishing zones and shooting and attacking fishermen and their boats. And this is a scene from Gaza City, which was once a big fishing area. So the story of We Are Not Numbers is that it was founded in early 2015 by an American journalist named Pam Bailey. And the name comes from the idea that when the reports were coming in from the 2014 war, they were frequently something like, 3 Israelis were injured, their names are this and this and this, they have children, their mothers are this, blah, 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 huge amounts of description about the Israeli people. And then they might say 300 Palestinians were killed. And so Palestinians were referred to as numbers and not as people. Now, this project was supported by Rami Abdu, who's the board chair for the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor, under the umbrella of Euromed, which is a group that provides logistical support. Currently, the fiscal sponsor is Nonviolence International. And Pam was basically inspired by a guy named Ahmed Al-Nouk, who's a 22-year-old living in Deir al-Bala, which is sort of in the south. And he had a brother named Ayman who was killed in 2014. And when Pam met him, he was this angry, raging guy who was thinking of joining some kind of military group. And she urged him to turn his grief and his rage and his desire for revenge into writing. And just to give you an example of the kind of things he has written, this is just one of his sentences, and he's referring to his brother. When he died, it was the hardest day of my life. He had been the only one by my side, and he never left me when I was in trouble. He died and left my mother cracked in pieces. He died and left my father weeping all night long. So she was really impressed with the power of this one-to-one mentoring that she was involved with. And this has been the model for this program. Now, I became involved in 2016. She asked me to be a mentor. And then, this is a volunteer organization, so it grows and fits in spurts. And so then she created an international board, which I was invited to join. And then she asked me to be in charge of the mentors. I'm sort of what I call myself the mentor mother. I interview mentors, potential mentors. I make sure people are all doing what they're supposed to do and try to figure out the glitches. So the way it works is that we match local writers, mostly between the ages of 17 and 29, to international mentors who have some substantial writing experience. And just this year, we're going beyond Gaza to include diaspora Palestinians. So for the writers, they get to share their lives, they vent their trauma and their anger and their hurt and their love and whatever comes, because they're writing from their own personal experience. They also get to develop their English language and journalistic skills, which are very valuable. They develop a pride in having their pieces published. And it's also sometimes an opening to new opportunities. I know writers who've gone on to get Fulbrights, who've gotten jobs in NGOs. I mean, having English language skills and journalistic skills is very valuable in a place where almost no one is employed. And as one writer said, the purpose is changing the stereotypes of people believing that Gaza is a place of death and war. There's also something in it for the mentors, because not only do we share our skills, both technical and creative, but we have an opportunity to develop relationships with these writers, and that's very powerful. So now when something happens in Gaza, I'm actually worrying about specific people that I can write to and ask them how they're doing and all this kind of stuff. We also get to learn about the realities of life in Gaza in a way that's very, very different from reading the news. Now, what's going on now, the process today, is that there was a call out for writers, and 96 people applied. And they filled out an application, and they submitted an essay about COVID-19 and their experiences with COVID-19. We reviewed all of those applications and culled out the people who either had very poor language skills or didn't seem that dedicated to actually doing this. And then the second group then gets interviewed in Gaza, all virtual, obviously. And then people are culled from that group. And our hope is to have between 30 and 50 new writers by February. So what's going to happen is that the people who are accepted into the program write an essay for them. They then do training in with We Are Not Numbers in Gaza. And then at some point, all of those essays get dumped into my email. And then my job is to match each writer with a mentor. The mentor and writer get introduced on email, and then the essay goes back and forth. And some people use email or WhatsApp or Skype or however they want to communicate, they communicate. And the process involves not only dealing with the technical structure of punctuation, grammar, and that kind of thing, but also the creative process, the arc of the story, the idea that you have a beginning, a middle, and end, and have a compelling message. I mean, we're trying to get this to be a powerful piece of writing. Once it's at its peak, it then goes to Pam, and she has two other people who are working with her as editors, and it goes to a final edit, and then it gets put up on the website. And sometimes pieces get picked up by other websites or newspapers. There have been 2 books published, one in English and one, believe it or not, that was translated into German after all of our struggles to get it into good English. So it's a beginning, but sometimes just having it on the website is just a powerful experience. So looking back at the accomplishments in 2020, We Are Not Numbers welcomed 80 new writers and published 152 stories, poems, and features. And just to give you a flavor for the kind of things that people write about, the last few that I saw were Let Hope Fly Like a Bird, which is a poem for the new year, My Hardest Vacation, which is a reality test on healthcare in Gaza, Gaza City's Unusual Beauty, which is a essay about the true beauty in the eye of the beholder, and A Calendar of Freedom, the love of a father for his son. And these are all on the website. This year, We Are Not Numbers was invited to publish in a German magazine, invited to participate in a webinar in Canada, had stories published in Bengali, and has this active website and YouTube. And as I mentioned, in previous years, there were 2 books that were published. So I thought it would be important to actually hear from some of these writers. And since, first of all, it's in the middle of the night there, but also doing anything technical with Gaza is always a little scary because sometimes there's no internet or no electricity or something like that. So I asked if they would just ask writers to send brief little statements. And a group of them recorded their statements. And I'm just going to share them with you so you get flavor for who these people are. And I need to make this thing go away. Okay, I need to get rid of the little thing at the bottom because I need to be able to start the video. Does anyone know how to do that? It's blocking my, oh, here it is. I can move it here. Thank you. Never mind. Okay, so this is Hanan.
Hi, I am Hanan Abu Kmail, medical doctor at Gaza Strip and writer at our number platform. Audience friends, what a year! For many of us, 2020 has been a year of struggle, awakening, healing, and growth. In 2020, one of the main threats to any writer's flow of thoughts elsewhere in the world was COVID-19, his scares from COVID-19. However, the main threats are so many for a writer living in Gaza. Living in Gaza means living in a place where the electricity is off more than on. Living in a place where the internet connection is bad most of the days. Where nearly everything in your daily life steals your privacy to have peace for thinking and writing. All of these beside the scares of COVID-19. The COVID-19 scare was amplified, especially when you, as a citizen and as a writer, realized that the nearly 15-year blockade eroded the healthcare system and declared sanitation and other infrastructure of health system in Gaza Strip. As early as March, UN Special Rapporteur Michael Link wrote that Gaza's health care system was collapsing even before the pandemic. Its stocks of essential drugs chronically low. Its natural sources of drinkable water are largely contaminated. Its electrical system provides sporadic power. When realizing these facts about the health system, as a citizen in Gaza Strip and as a doctor, keep me and keep you understanding that Palestinians in Gaza have been more vulnerable to pandemic. Moreover, and unfortunately, health workers in Gaza remain under-equipped not only to treat patients, but also to protect themselves, because basic personal protective equipment, supplies such as surgical masks, face shield, are not reliably available. This makes me, as a doctor, live in daily stress from COVID-19 and keep overthinking my family and relatives and their chance of getting the infection from me. Listen to this also. Even in Christmas, the Israeli occupation didn't miss the opportunity to scare us in Gaza by putting our lives at risk. On 26th of December, Israel hit Gaza with massive airstrikes in the middle of the night. One of their targets was a Dura Children's Hospital, where I work. All in all, here in Gaza, everything is challenging my ability to think and write. And sometimes I try to imagine how my ability to write will be if I am citizen, writer, doctor in another country.
So this is Khalid.
Hi there, this is Khalid Dader from Gaza Strip. I am a WAN writer And living in the Gaza Strip, I've been facing a lot of difficulties, barriers before, even before COVID like pops in the world. So what COVID did or is doing now is just uh, giving us or loading the burden against us. It's even more difficult for us. But we've been coping. This is what we do in the Gaza Strip, either electricity, occupation, blockade, and now COVID-19. So this is not really a difficult job for us. We've been trained to do so, but that doesn't mean that we don't like we don't feel bad about this. So as a writer, like I feel that writing is the one thing that I can do easily.
This is Shad. It's a little out of focus, but she's very clear.
Hi everyone, so I'm making this video to talk about what it feels like to be a student and a writer in Gaza. Actually, I think everybody knows that writing is considered to be a way out for every human being on earth. But actually, sometimes it goes beyond that and it sits as burden for me. And that goes because of one of the let's say the most main problems in Gaza Strip, which is electricity. Actually, in Gaza, electricity comes for
Sorry.
only 8 hours, which is something that is so terrible and so tough on us. And I can say I feel that more than others do, and that goes to the fact that I actually serve as a volunteer in We Are Not Numbers. I also work, or not work, let me say, I'm volunteering as operations coordinator in my university's club and many other teams, you know. So this thing basically means that I have to do too many assignments and I have to, you know, submit my tasks on time and do a lot of work via internet and you know these kind of things. Sometimes the internet is not needed, but laptops or computers might be, and that goes to you know, Microsoft apps and this kind of things. So I need them. So I try to solve this problem with something that is so, you know, easy, which is I bring, or let me say, I focus in my work on my pens and books. So I write down everything I need and try to get the most of my work done this way, which is, you know, it's a very traditional way and it's not what is supposed to be done. And in 2020, you know, this is the 21st century and we're doing so traditional things, so old things, you know, so it doesn't feel good at all. And it's, let me say, at the end, I have to use the computer. And in this case, I have to wait for the electricity. And this is really something so hard for me. But what I like about this story is that I believe that pain always, you know, finds its way to make us feel something beautiful. I think it's a step of victory. You know, after I get everything done, after all of this challenging things, I find myself feeling like happiness, you know, victory, these kind of things, which is something that I'm so proud of because I still managed to get my things done, you know, despite of all things happening. And I can say, in addition to all of what I've said before, is that, you know, as I am a writer and we are not numbers, my mentors asked me to apply tips of advice on my written pieces, and this also needs electricity, needs computer, needs internet, needs me to read more articles, more, you know, to search for more websites and this kind of things. You know, I want to be so creative when it comes to writing, but I think I'm so limited because they are 8 hours only. So, you know, it's just, it goes for studying, it goes for the assignments I do for my teams, for the teams I am in, and you know, in addition to We Are Not Numbers, which is really tough. But I still see the victorious or the victory I feel after getting into that. all of that, which is, as you can see, it's a challenge. And let me say that okay, writing sometimes remembers me of the pain I faced in Gaza, but it is still, my friend, my love, my escape, and it's the soulmate that when I meet, I set myself free. I set my soul free, and I feel so much me. So I think, or I believe, that's it. And this is the video, and I hope you liked it. And thanks for everything you're doing. And actually, getting this video shooted or shot, let me say, is also.
So she cut off there, but I thought it was really important to hear her words. This is Rivan.
Hi everyone, it's Rima Botin. I'm a writer by night and I'm English trainer by day. Joining one is my pleasure and it adds to Rima a lot. Okay, and speaking about writing, I'm talking about writing. Writing in general, it's challenging, like to come up with all ingredients together and to come up with and your recipe is a challenging to regular writers in the world. But to writers or writing in conditions and like the spot where I live in Gaza, it's more challenging and it's more enjoyable at the same time. So there are two factors that I think they are challenges to me as my experience says. Okay, the first factor or the first challenge is privacy, and the suitable atmosphere that any writer would like to have. As I live with my family, like I need a place for me to write and express my thoughts and think clearly about that topic I'm writing about. So I'm a person, I can't write anything within people are talking around me. So I have two options. The first option is to wake up early in the morning after the dawn and it's so peace, nobody is awake, so I can write, and it tells a lot. And the second one, I uh, I I need to change the place. I don't want to work in the same place, which is my bedroom, and that most of us in 2020 work from their bedrooms. So I need to walk 5 minutes away to our garden, which is next to our bedroom. It's nature, and you feel relaxed somehow, and you can write and write without any interruption. That's it for the first factor. The second one, which is all of us here in Gaza struggle with, is the poor internet access. Um, in my writing process, I need to collect some data about the topic I'm writing about, and sometimes I need to search before starting. Okay, but poor internet access, it doesn't help at all. Like it sometimes takes longer than it should be, and really.
Okay, she was cut off, but I will move to the next person. Hala.
Hello, my name is Hala Shaman. I'm from Palestine, Gaza Strip. Um, I've just finished my master's degree in social anthropology with achieving scholarship in the UK, Durham University. I will talk a little bit about my experience with We Are Not Numbers and writing. There's so many difficulties in writing about the situation, the political and the social situation in Palestine. And I will mention some of them that I faced, especially being outside of Gaza. One of them is memorizing the memories and writing about them. It's been very difficult and painful to remember what happened, write about it, especially with bringing the details of it, and also presenting what we write and having discussions about that. Another difficulty I faced was within being here outside of Gaza Strip, outside of Palestine, outside of the real war zone, and knowing about some escalations or bad situations happening there. It's very painful when it happens, and you feel like you're disconnected from the place you're sitting in. You're physically here, but mentally, emotionally not here. You're just there, but can't really be there. It's even hard to write about that. It's hard to express it. Until now, I haven't been able to write about my daily life experience in being in Gaza. It might be one of my future projects to write about. Writing without having electricity, having to wake up in very late hours at night to write something or to read something because we don't have the electricity all the time.
So Noor's face comes on, but I think she has something important to say. Her face comes on about halfway.
Hi, I'm Noor, 22 years old Palestinian living in Gaza. I'm a writer to earn my numbers, and I was asked about the troubles we face here as writers. So I will not talk about electricity nor other issues we face here as humans. I'd rather say that I never find anything optimistic to write about. Everything, totally everything I write about turns out to be so dark, so pessimistic, and I don't want to be so psychopath, but that's normal and that's true here. So yeah, I guess I'm now mentally unable to write one positive sentence.
This is Mohammed.
Hello, I'm Mohammed Shaban, a Palestinian activist, writer, and translator from Gaza. I've started writing since the beginning of the Great March of Return that I have an important message that focuses on the Palestinian rights of return to their original homelands and live in peace without any violation to their legal basic human rights, in addition to convey the Palestinian message or to convey the real image of Palestine to the international community, especially the Western community, and tell them who is terrorist by showing them the Israeli crimes against our Palestinian peaceful Palestinian people. Actually, I faced many problems in the beginning. One of the biggest problems that I faced is the big difference between the Palestinian discourse and the Western discourse, that the Palestinian discourse is related to some ideological, religious, national background that identifies the way we deliver our message. So the world thinks that we are terrorists and we want just to kill, but we actually want to express our rights of self-defense and resistance. However, the Western discourse focuses or use more peaceful language to express their ideas, messages, and stories. We have the same message, but the way we deliver our message is so different. Also, there's another problem in the Palestinian discourse itself, that there's no clear strategy between the or among the Palestinian factions and the Palestinian discourse have some contradictions because of the Palestinian split between Hamas, Fatah, and the other factions. That's in addition to some or to the other problems like the progressive cuts of the electricity, and now we have a big problem to access a good internet. But what I want to say is that writing is not an easy job, and it needs more from us to deliver our message to the world.
Hello everyone, this is Malik Zakut from Gaza, a writer and a poet. And today I'd like to talk about one of the obstacles and one of the main problems that cloud over my ability to write. It's the shortage of electricity, obviously. being a Gazan means to be a robot. Like actually, it means to be a robot because you organize your life in a way that everything is okay when the electricity comes and everything stops and everything pauses when the electricity goes off. I mean, let's talk about writing specifically. When one writes, it's because they have something inside and they want to let it out. They they need to be in an atmosphere of tranquility. They need to be calm and they need to be stable. And that stableness cuts off when the electricity cuts off. You're not in that mood anymore to write. So imagine yourself writing about something and you have that energy of writing about that specific thing and everything is going just fine. And then the electricity cuts off. And when I say the electricity cuts off, I mean we light candles. Um, and lighting candles isn't the best way that like inspires people to write, and it's not the best atmosphere to write. Um, So yeah, that's our lives here in Gaza. It's like part of the problem is being a Gazan, but it's the most welcome burden to me. It's an honor being a Gazan, like really. That's all I wanted to say about that obstacle.
Hi, my name is Tasneem Khader. I am 22 years old. I live in Rafah and I studied English literature at the Quds Open University Rafah branch. Since then, I loved writing and I had the desire to share our messages and our stories as Palestinians with the world. And that's why I applied for We Are Not Numbers and I was so lucky to be selected one of the writers. In my latest story, I wrote about how a normal life in Gaza can be turned into something else all of a sudden. And this is due to the wars and attacks that happen to Gaza. However, we love life. One was more than a family to me. I learned a lot through the sessions that they used to make, and I enjoyed my time through the gatherings and made new friendships there. And I also shared a lot about myself through the circles that they used to make, though I'm not kind of person who loves to open up to people that easily, but I did with one. I am really so proud to be a winner. Thank you.
Just a few more.
Hello there. Good day to you. My name is Mahmoud Nabhan. I'm 24 years old. I live in the north of Gaza City. I learned English when I finished high school because I knew English would open so many closed doors for me. And then I studied English at university. And here I am. I'm looking forward to completing my master's degree in a different field, maybe politics and international relations. Basically, anything helps my people and society. Um, Regarding to We Are Not Number, it really was an amazing moment when I first received the email that I got accepted. I remember I told myself, oh my God, Mahmoud, you are officially a member in the Lions Peak. Yes, because I believe We Are Not Number is carrying a great message to the world. It is the voice for those who do not have a voice. And I really wanted to take part in this. I myself I myself have stories to be told, things to be shared. You can check my story. We had an intensive training program. We met new amazing people. We gained so much experience and knowledge. Finally, I'd like to share with you something. Whatever your circumstances, whatever your situation, if you want to do something, go through it. Take action, and you will find your way. So much love from Gaza, Mahmoud.
Hey, it's Sumaya Abunada, and I live in Gaza, Palestine. I joined We Are Not Numbers as a volunteer writer, and I'm currently their activities coordinator. I joined them because I believe in their message to the whole world that we are just not numbers and we are a whole nation that has an existence. And I have, according to my dreams, I have plenty dreams, many dreams. Seeing the whole world is one of them. And visiting the ocean and see what's beyond it is also one of them. And as long as we are writing about Palestine, it will remain alive in the memory of history and the memory of the whole world. So I hope the coming days will be safe and sound for the Palestinian and Palestine. And thank you so much.
Okay, I don't have a face for him, but he has a good story. And there's one more after this.
Hello, this is Muhammad Rafiq, a Palestinian writer. I live in Gaza and I am a published contributor with We Are Not Numbers. When I first got told that I have to talk about the problems we Gazan writers face when we write, I thought like this video is gonna make it for like an hour and a half, but I knew then that I have to make it as short as possible, and I would make it with only a few problems, although they are, you know, countless, and they couldn't be contained in one single video. But to make it as easy as possible and short as well, I'm gonna mention only two major obstacles we suffering from on regular or on a daily basis actually. The first one is the electricity crisis. We in Gaza here are with no electricity over, you know, more than 2/3 of the day. So you can imagine how your day would be without having lights or electricity for more than, you know, 10 hours a day. And this is really, you know, suffocating. For example, speaking of reality, I have been writing a story to get published on We Are Not Numbers for now more than 5 days. The reason it took that long because whenever I get busy writing, the electricity gets off and the power outage goes away. So I postpone my stops and my to do things till the second shift of the electricity comes back in. This is the very first part of the electricity problem. You could almost spend your whole day without even seeing a light in your room or at your office. So it makes you like psychologically sick. Not even you could not see well, you could not focus well, you could not do your things as supposed to, but it also takes you to postpone the things you are supposed to do because you don't have, you know, lights, you don't have electricity, and your hands are tied. You don't have any other alternatives or choices to change that circumstance. The second part of electricity problem is that we don't have internet access while electricity is off. And you know, the let's say internet is really substantial and really significant when writing, because sometimes you need to include in your writing some particular information, some statistics, surveys, recent studies about the topic you are writing, but you don't have access to the internet. Even if you could hardly deliver internet while your electricity is off, it would be very slow and you would have very poor connection. And it keeps pausing and getting off every single, you know, 10 minutes, for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So no internet, no electricity at the same time, is really something worth, contemplating. It is really problematic. The second crisis is that when you are a writer, you are doing something against the mainstream of jobs in the Gaza Strip. You lack, the training needed, the skills sufficient for you to be a writer, the qualifications required to get you a higher standard of knowledge, of information about how you would deliver your voice and message to the whole world. And also, being a writer in an occupation place is that you are risking your life. I know some persons who got in prison because of some words they have written, and they got published, because our major supply of communication and internet is from the occupation. So you are being watched. Your laptop is not free of the occupation eyes. Your iPhone, everything is being, could be hacked, could be watched, and you could get yourself in prison because of the words you are writing. They might get to you very easily. The situation is different in the West Bank, but in Gaza, we feel the same. You feel in fear. You feel that you are surrounded by a military system or an occupation that keeps its eyes on you all the time. And also, let's say, the third problem is that sometimes you feel the discouragements coming from different sides. For example, everyone is afraid of politics. Everyone is afraid of the occupation. Everyone is afraid of the harsh policies the occupation is practicing against us as Palestinians in Gaza. So if a kid or a guy in like my age is writing something about politics, about the occupation, his parents would always be nagging him against the thing he's doing, because we don't need our son to be jailed. We don't need our son to get present when he gets outside Gaza or checked in a military checkpoint. So please, son, keep yourself away of that things and stuffs, and don't do such, sensitive things. We are in a place that deals with occupational system. So get yourself away of this. Electricity, internet access, occupation watching, everything is, is discouraging you to do writing. But although we have, these single problematic crisis, we keep doing, because we have something to deliver. We have a message to say to the whole world that we are not only fighting for the sake of fighting, but we are fighting for the sake of freedom, of history, of heritage, of our humanity, and our human rights. Yeah, for sure, for our human rights. And we don't need the world to pity us or feel pity for us. We need the world to stand in solidarity with us, because we are fighting to get our human rights back, to get our lands we were expelled from back, that our ancestors and grandparents and grandmothers got expelled from, forcibly left their original lands and homes. So a writer in Gaza, I would say it is, like, in one word description, it is the hardest thing you can do in Gaza. It is not a job that affords you security. It is not a job that affords you a well-being life, but it's a job that keeps you always in tension, in fear, and problems, whether like problems in the same strip or problems when you get outside Gaza. Electricity is off for more than 2/3 of the day. You don't have access to the internet. The occupation is putting us, or like, let's say, puts a strain on every way possible that would ease the process of writing for us, the process of, you know, spreading our voice, spreading our messages to the whole world. So I'm sorry I'm getting this very long, but I had to say my things and stuffs. Thank you so much for watching my video. And again, I'm delivering my thanks for you all. And thank you so much.
And this is the last writer.
Hi, I'm Zainab and I'm 19 years old. I live in Deir al-Balah city in Gaza Strip. About my dreams, I hope to be a professional translator in the future, translate more books, and I hope to travel more and to learn more, take my master, my PhD, and to learn with no limits. About where I learned English from, I learned English mostly from TV shows, movies, and books. I read a lot and I watched a lot of movies, and so I learned English from there. And I'm still learning though from my college or other sources. About why I joined We Are Not Numbers. About why I joined We Are Not Numbers, it was because I want my voice to be heard with no limits. Like, no one can change my words or cut them. I need my words, my voice to be heard. I have been writing all my life, but I never get my written pieces published. So I just joined We Are Not Numbers because I want my voice to be heard. And I want to be with people like me, with people with experiences to give me, because I aspire to become a good writer in the future. So being in We Are Not Numbers is going to give me a great chance to make my writing skills better. My final advice to you is to live your life just the way you are. Don't try to change yourself just so other people like you, or just change who you are. Never do this, because life is too short to pretend. You just gotta live every day the way you are, the way you feel like you want it to be, the way you love. One more thing, never ever judge the book by its cover. Never judge people. They always have one chapter of their life that they don't read out loud. So just be nice and kind to them, because you don't know what they are going through. They are just a closed book, and you don't know what's going on in their lives, what they have been through before. So you have no right to judge people by what you see. And just be kind, be well. Goodbye.
So that's a little taste of the writers here. So I just want to end this conversation by just talking about some of the opportunities. If you are a writer or have editing experience or think you could be a mentor, I would be happy to hear from you. I also urge people to check out the website and read the stories that people have written. There's a way to donate. There's the only paid people are the 3 Gaza youth that run the project in Gaza. They rent an office, they rent video equipment. And it's also possible that you could just publicize the website via social media and email, or find media that would be willing to republish the stories. Sign up to receive an email when each new story is posted. And you can also use the information that you can find on the website as you write letters to the editor or pieces, or do political organizing for yourself. So I'm going to now just end, except that my thing won't advance, with a final poem by one of the writers. And these photos were all taken from the website. This is by Basman Derwawi. Where were you? Where were you on this day in 2008 when the assault started? The question opens my unhealed scars, a flashback to the first day of war, the beginning of my PTSD, a day I will never forget. It was a peaceful Saturday, Shabbat Shalom, or that's what I thought. I was on my way to university before the first explosion assaulted my ears. For a while, I thought the wheel of the car in which I was riding had blown out, until I saw the black clouds over the sky of Gaza. It was the first time I smelled blood in the street. A handsome young man was now a guy marked with a scar, forever a topic of conversation. For others, it was worse. It was the first time children witnessed dead bodies lying in the road, stealing their childhood, turning them into men. It was the first time when fathers cradled their lifeless daughters, dividing their hearts into parts. 1,391, says Betselem. The number of dead in Operation Cast Lead. Each had a story. So thank you. So now we can do a Q&A.
Wow, Alice, thank you so much for bringing these stories for us to hear, and for sharing that work with us and all the work that you do. We've had a few questions that were posed in the chat that I wanted to ask you, if you might respond to them. One question is about the choice to present this in English and the serendipity of having some, it sounds like, translated in German and Bengali. And is there any other plans to extend the availability of this work to other languages? You sounded, you said a little bit about how it's a lot of work to get it to sound the right way or to read the right way in English, and so I can imagine it being similarly hard in other languages. Are there plans? What are the resources that are needed if there are
Sure.
plans? And I guess I just want to add one more thing to that, which is I saw on your website, and I was wondering if I could share my screen and just have it beside us, that there are now photo stories that seem to be developing. So if not other languages, under other media that could represent these stories in different kinds of ways. Is that all right if I do that?
Sure.
Okay.
So, there was a decision to use, to write in English because it's a language of power and it's a language that much of the world speaks. I don't, this is an organization that runs with, bubble gum and sweat. And so I'm not party to like what the grand vision is, but right now the vision is to get the stories up on the website. And oftentimes that can take months because there are so many issues getting everything together. And then there's a whole thing about posting, and, we're all volunteers. So I don't think there's any grand scheme to write it, to get it translated into other languages, but I think if it comes up, it would certainly be welcome. The reason the book was translated into German was that the only publisher that we could find was a German publisher, because publishers tend not to be interested in stories from Gaza. I think there is, and this is just from observing the chatter and what we talk about, but not because I'm privy to like these kind of decisions. There is a push to have video work and more photo work and more artwork on the website. So I think that there's an exploration of other ways that you can communicate, but I don't know of like any detailed plan to publish in other languages. And translation is a huge whole other world.
Right, great, thank you
Whole
so
other
much.
challenge.
Another question from Bob Herbst. He says, these figures seem to reflect a huge crime against humanity, if not genocide. Have there been any lawsuits in international forums or in American courts or other national courts?
Lawsuits against the Israeli occupation, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there have been cases taken to the international court. I honestly don't know beyond that. And beyond what the UN, the UN puts out various statements about crimes against humanity, but I don't know what the official legal status is. And if someone in the audience knows, they should raise their hand or put it in the chat so you can see.
Great. Yeah, I invite people who might be more in the know on that front to write in the chat, and I can share it with everyone.
One of the problems is that the UN has named a lot of the behaviors as crimes, but it doesn't come to any power, and nothing happens, except that Palestinians are more organized and there's the boycott movement, and a lot is happening, but it's not happening in the courts.
Barbara Bearfield from JVP Detroit asked a question. Yes, she said that she knows you well.
Yes.
What can be done to get medical help and the COVID vaccine to Gazans and Palestinians living in the West Bank?
So that is a very, very important and big question. As far as COVID goes, the Israelis have been in the news a lot because they are having a very successful immunization program, and they bought early and often, as we say, and they have a very organized healthcare system with these big HMOs. So they are actually probably going to have the most successful vaccination program in the world. what they have chosen not to do is to vaccinate anybody under occupation. And that means that even Israeli, Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, the guards are getting vaccinated, but the prisoners are not, which is, beyond cruel as far as anyone can imagine. So the Israelis are continuing to behave in the way they behave, which is treating Palestinians like they're not human. And the other great irony is that there are tens of thousands of Palestinians who work in Israel. So Israelis are actually putting themselves at risk if they don't vaccinate workers who come into Israel. So it's a totally ridiculous policy. The Palestinians have been part of something called COVAX, COVAX, which is an international program being run with the UN and I think UNICEF and a whole bunch of humanitarian kind of organizations. And their plan is to try to provide the vaccine to areas that are, poverty-stricken areas or areas that are not empowered to get the vaccine or to be able to buy it. And there's also been some chatter that I've seen, because I actually keep a weekly COVID-19 timeline on the Jewish Voice for Peace, that the Palestinians were trying to buy a vaccine from Russia. But that nothing has happened. And some of the stuff I've seen is that they're going to wait months for vaccine. So there certainly are a lot of international efforts to make that happen, and also for other regions that are equally distressed. But it's not going well. In terms of getting medical equipment, there have been a lot of fundraising calls for fundraising from UNRWA, that is the United Nations Relief and Works, what's the last word? Works Association. And they are responsible for all the healthcare for Palestinian refugees. So UNRWA has done a lot of fundraising. Another group that's done fundraising is Medical Aid for Palestinians. It's a very excellent British group. They recently did a whole thing to try to get ventilators into Gaza because I think Gaza has something like 200 ventilators for 2.2 million people. I think they recently ran out of oxygen. It's just horrific. And one of the great ironies is at the beginning of the pandemic, the Israelis bought masks that were made in Gaza in garment factories. So it's basically sweatshop conditions where they could get the masks cheap. So they're fine, when they need something from Gazans, but God forbid that they should then help them, even though that's their responsibility as an occupier. So the injustice in this is just blatantly painful, basically. So, but I would look at those two organizations. I think you could also look at Physicians for Human Rights Israel. They recently had a medical team get into Gaza and bringing supplies and doing healthcare. So that's another group to think about.
Great, thank you. So Linda Ray was thinking about the demographics of the writers. You had mentioned that the ages span 17 to 29. I sort of invite you to say a little bit more about the choices there. And then Linda was in particular interested in the gender breakdown of the writers, if you happen to know.
Right. So, this program was established before I joined. So I'm just reporting what the realities are. So I don't know why 29 is the cutoff or 17. Gazans tend to be living at home, and so there's a sort of prolonged childhood as you're living under your parents' house. And even when people get married, they tend to live under the parents' house because there's not enough housing, and if no one has a job, you're at home. So I don't know how the definition of youth got made, but that's what it is. In terms of the gender, more women join the program because more writers are women. That's and it's fun for me because a lot of times women are much more, and it's just women everywhere are much more willing to write about how they're feeling and what their emotions are. And for the male writers, I have a lot of struggle. Like, well, when that bomb went off, how did you feel? Just don't tell me what it looked like. So the gender stuff is just fascinating and very universal.
Thanks. So I'm a college professor, and you had mentioned the possibility of recruiting mentors.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to ask you one more time to repeat how you might become a mentor, and then maybe in particular, would it be valuable for college professors to recruit their students who might already be published writers, or are you looking for people who already have a degree?
Sure. So, I mean, just so you know, I don't have a degree in English literature or any writing training. So basically, to be a mentor, you have to be a writer of some sort, or you have to have writing experience, or you have to have published writing experience, or you have to have editing experience, something that gives you the qualifications. I mean, there are a number of people who are ESL teachers, but something that gives you qualifications so that you understand the English language, and also you understand how to tell a story, because it's not just getting the grammar right. You know, it has to be a compelling story. So there has to be movement within it, and there has to be a story arc, and the tenses have to be in the same, you know, that kind of stuff. So if someone thinks that they have some of those qualifications, they should get in touch with me. I'm the person who interviews every possible mentor. Why don't I'll put my email in the chat as soon as I stop talking. So what happens is that people either refer people to me, or I hear about people, or people just write to me. Then I interview them. And if it seems like a good fit, then they submit a bio, a photo, and we go forth. And you know, there are mentors that don't work out, or that think they know how to mentor, but actually don't. So every now and then we have to say to a mentor, you know, you're not, these are the things that need improvement. Do you think you could do that? And if they can't, then they don't. And so, you know, there's a whole juggle. I mean, some writers are totally gung-ho, and then when it actually comes to getting critiqued and having someone say that phrase is completely not understandable, and the writer says, but that's my most valuable moment in the words that I love most, and you have to say, I'm sorry, it's like, that's not how you speak English, you know? I mean, you know, you have all the dynamics of editing and taking editing advice, and can you give advice, and can you receive advice? I mean, the dynamics are just, you know, fabulously interesting if you find that exciting.
Yeah, and how some experience might just be untranslatable.
Yeah.
So kind of admitting the limitations of the word.
Yeah, and also, you know, you don't want to take away someone's voice. You want to preserve, you know, uplift their voice, but it also has to be comprehensible. So it may be their voice, but if it's not comprehensible, it's not the way you can communicate. So you have to always then come back to, you are trying to communicate to an English speaking audience. I'm the English speaking audience. Let me tell you how that sounds to me, or let me guess what you're trying to say, you know, whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's really helpful. There were lots of reactions to the testimonials that you offered. A couple in direct response to Mohammed Rafiq's. I don't know if you remember his. So one question from Stephen Bruce was, do they have a VPN, a virtual private network, that might improve their internet access? I think was behind the question, and then there was another question about whether that might be surveilled and not available.
So I have no idea.
Okay,
all I know is that internet is unreliable, on and off, slow, unreliable. Yeah. I don't know the technicalities, but it's definitely related to the lack of electricity. But the Gazans are heavily surveilled people. There are drones. I mean, some of the writers write about the drones. There are drones buzzing all the time, monitoring everything. You know, they're just heavily surveilled. And so I wouldn't be surprised that whatever they do on the internet is surveilled.
Right. Another question is, I think there's a moment when Mohammed says that the situation in the West Bank is better, and he wonders, is that true, or is this an example? This is my word. Is this an example of the grass is always greener?
Right. No, the situation in the West Bank is definitely better. So the thing to remember about Gaza is it's totally blockaded. So very, very little gets out or gets in, and very few people get out or get in. The West Bank is under occupation, and there are hundreds of checkpoints, and there are Jewish settlements, and there's the whole military apparatus that goes along with the Jewish settlements. And you know, it's not a great situation, but it is better than trying to live in Gaza in terms of, you know, you may have to go through a checkpoint and wait hours and never know whether you're going to get to school or not, but you do have a school, and the economy's a little better, and you know, the ability to go in and out is a little better. I mean, West Bankers can't necessarily get into Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, but they often can get out through Jordan. So it is better living situation. And there's a question about donating. There's a donation button on the website, and I trust that the organization takes the money and sends it to We Are Not Numbers because of the people that I work with.
Great. So I've two more questions at least, and I will monitor the chat if there are more. So again, I'm sort of grasping towards analogies. So I was thinking about one of the people in the chat had mentioned how the feeling of insecurity and the feeling of being cooped up that many people around the world are experiencing right now because of COVID and social distancing. Gives us some insight, but is of course not at all, quantitatively or whatever, qualitatively comparable. But it gives us some insight into what it might be like to live in Gaza. So I'm thinking about other kinds of analogies. So again, as a college instructor, it seems like many university professors, university presidents, are talking about this COVID crisis, as a 4-year crisis. So even if we are fully vaccinated or largely vaccinated, or a student population is vaccinated by next fall, that's optimistic. But even if that were the case, it still is this like 4-year process. And I wonder whether, what if that's what's going on for the trauma and the the impact and the need to carry people through a traumatic moment, and that's COVID for 4 years. What do you think is an analog for the people of Gaza?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the big problem with the kind of oppression that the people in Gaza are experiencing is that it's unrelenting and that there's no endpoint. If I look at Israeli policy, it seems like their policy is basically to periodically crush the Gazans a little bit more and keep them in the dark ages as much as possible. And the Gazans are very vibrant, intelligent, hardworking people who are determined not to be squished. And that there's this like thing going back and forth. And then you have the whole political mess between Fatah and Hamas. And periodically I hear that they're having talks and they're understanding that they maybe should be on the same page. And there's so much political dysfunction that colors the lives, the realities in Gaza that, I don't honestly know, besides a prison, what analogy you could think of. And even a prison doesn't work, because in a prison, the guards are responsible for the welfare of the prisoners, whereas the Israelis have imprisoned the Gazans and then basically said, Oslo, we're not responsible, you're on your own. And so it's a really, really tough kind of situation. I don't have a specific analogy because it's just, there's so many different dynamics to this thing.
Yeah.
And also, a Gazan could have, a cousin living in Israel and a cousin living in the West Bank, and they're all in the same family, so it's just different. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess when I think about this, I think that the end of the trauma is not merely when there is some state that actually has responsibility for these people, either in a two-state solution or a one-state solution. The trauma will persist, and I can imagine, and my fear is that even this feels far away, one or two state solution, but even if that were achieved, I can imagine people think, okay, let's turn our attention somewhere else. The harm is done.
Right,
and
right.
It seems like when we start thinking about this in terms of a trauma with ongoing effects, that helps us understand that the kind of attention and assistance and mutual aid that might need to be extended to these people is much more than just liberation.
Right. I mean, I've done work with the Gaza community mental health program that works a lot with trauma. And I recall we had a conversation with the executive director, and he was saying that, with the 2014 war, there was just massive amounts of trauma. I mean, the head of the center lost 27 family members. I mean, just to give you volume of trauma. But he said now that people, gradually work through the stuff and they stop having panic attacks every minute and crying all the time and all the things that traumatized people do. But if there's anything that, like an explosion, a loud noise, it like triggers something that comes back. So people get re-traumatized every time there's another incursion. So that's why it's like unending. And it will need a tremendous amount of, people will need a tremendous amount of healing. But, you also think of people in Syria, people in Yemen. I mean, there are countries in Sudan. I mean, there are countries with hugely traumatized populations, unrelenting, that need enormous support from the outside world. So I put them in that category.
I think one final question. You had said this again. I might just ask you to say it one more time. What is the thing that we can do to get these stories shared within the Jewish community in particular? Was one participant's question, but we could just say more broadly. Is there a focus on getting this into the Jewish community, not just among people who are already sympathetic to the cause, but more broadly? Is the focus even more than that?
Well, I think the role that people in Gaza have is to tell their stories and get them on the website. And it's our job as Palestinian solidarity activists to take those stories and uplift them wherever we can. And my experience is that there's not such a thing as the Jewish community, so different parts of the community require different strategies. So I think in the progressive community, it is possible to have people have meetings about We Are Not Numbers, have groups support We Are Not Numbers, have reading groups that read We Are Not, there's all that kind of stuff that you can just get people educated and also supporting the project. In the more traditional Jewish community, there's so much work to be done. And, as someone who has spent a lot of time trying to wiggle my way into more traditional Jewish communities and know how difficult it is, this would just be another way to do it. The thing that I find is that personal stories are often much more powerful than a talk about the politics of the region or something. So personal narratives are a way to get through people's defenses. And sometimes when I look at some of the folks I know in Gaza, I mean, we could all be cousins. We all look very similar. And it reminds me that the personal is really a way to cut through people's fears and prejudices and inability to see a whole human being, on the other side. So that's how it could be used. But the mainstream Jewish community, is very hard. And an organization like Jewish Voice for Peace is doing that kind of work and has highlighted We Are Not Numbers in the context of a lot of other projects. So, I think you can also, since there's a real focus on cross-sectional work, you can talk about Gaza and you can talk about militarism and you can talk about, the occupation of American cities and the occupation of Gaza. I mean, there are all these ways to find commonalities and cross-sectional commonalities, because I don't think, although Gaza is an extraordinary situation, you shouldn't make Palestine the special case that's like different from every other case. It's like human beings living under military occupation with the needs that every human being has of education and health and safety. And, so you can broaden the conversation that way. Because, they've been painted as terrorists, but it's much more complicated.
Yeah, this is the busting the stereotypes. Yeah, that's such a wonderful and powerful image. I think we have come to the end of our questions, and so I think my last question is is there something that we might want to make sure that we take away from our interaction tonight that you really want to emphasize and have the last final word on that?
Well, what I would urge people to do is just remember what's going on in Gaza. I mean, it's very easy to have, sort of sympathy fatigue because there's so many catastrophes going on all over the place. And Gaza is often forgotten and it's often off the map. And the Israelis have done an excellent job of demonizing Gazans, and the US is, trotting right along with the Israelis. So I think that keeping the issue of Gaza, the injustices that Gazans experience, the humanity of Gazans, and the beauty of Gaza is a very beautiful place, and there's a tremendous history, and there's literature, and there's art, and all of that's going on, and you would never know it. So I think that uplifting that reality and refusing to either forget or otherize Gazans is a really important part of doing Palestine solidarity work.
Thank you, Alice, so much for sharing your humanity, for sharing this humanity of these Gazans, and for being with us tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure.
I wanted to finally conclude our meeting and also promote our next conversation, which is with Jeff Halper. Jeff Halper has a new book, and we would like to have him come and talk with us about that book. And it is called Decolonizing Israel, Liberating Palestine. And we will have him visiting us. Our meetings are always the first Wednesday of every month. This will be February 3rd, again, 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And similar to how you signed up for this meeting, you can sign up for that one. Thank you guys so much. And I really appreciate everyone being here, and Connie for organizing us, Farrell for introducing us, Michael for all the behind the scenes and the beauty of tonight. Take care.